Hi, I am Ashley Amoya, and this is my ethical dilemma presentation. So, in the scenario that I chose, an unfamiliar man enters the counseling office. He was slightly frantic, implied that he knew his wife was in the building, and asked the receptionist to give her a message. The receptionist did not confirm or deny the presence of the spouse in session, but she did take the message of the unfamiliar man and agreed to give it to the alleged spouse. The source of this is the helpful receptionist video, which was found in our class. So, the problem in this scenario is mainly the breach of confidentiality between the client and the practice. By disclosing the information about the client's session and taking the message without consent, the receptionist violated the client's right to privacy, which is mostly an ethical problem, but it's also a professional problem. The receptionist breach the client's confidentiality and needs to be trained properly when it comes to ethical guidelines in the counseling profession. So, when applying the ACA standards and state codes, as well as the federal law, there were a couple of standards that applied to this, as well as a New York State Regents rule, and of course HIPAA. So we're going to go through the ACA standards. They were mainly in Section A and Section C, and we'll go through them. Section A1 broadly discusses confidentiality and how important it is to protect client information. Section A2A is regards the counselor responsibilities to safeguard the client's information and also informed consent. Section A4A, this situation was not in the best interest of the client. It puts the client's well-being at risk by causing distress in the current divorce. And so that part is regarding the client's well-being and how it should be top priority. And then Section C1 broadly talks about the counselor's obligation to have integrity and follow a code of ethics. And then Section C2E talks about ethical obligation and decision making and how counselors are encouraged to engage in a systematic process when faced with an ethical dilemma like this. The New York State Regents Rule, Section 29.1B8, talks about professional responsibility to maintain confidentiality and not to discuss revealing personal or identifying info that is gathered in counseling without first getting consent from the client. And that is from the New York State Mental Health Counselor Association. The ACA Code of Ethics standards are from the ACA Code of Ethics. And then the HIPAA, which is the federal level law, focuses on protecting patients' privacy of their medical records, which includes mental health. And the receptionist ultimately needed authorization from the client prior to speaking with the husband, and that is from the CDC website. So now moving into the nature and dimensions of this ethical dilemma. Some moral principles that were compromised are autonomy, non-maleficence, and justice. So autonomy is the client's right to be in control of her own personal information, and she should be making the decision on who to share it with, and that's from Forrester, Miller, and Davis, 2016. For non-maleficence, it's the importance of trust and therapeutic rapport. The receptionist's breach undermined the trust of the client, and it can ultimately jeopardize the therapeutic relationship. And that's Parker et al. 2022. And then justice, all clients should be treated fairly and equally, and that's from Daniel 2020. I felt that the most important one that was compromised here was the non-maleficence. It's our job as counselors to make sure that our clients feel safe and that we do not cause harm to them. And that is also from Forrester Miller and Davis, 2016. So I would talk to the experienced professionals that I would talk to are Lauren Fina and Kevin White from Peaceful Minds Counseling. And I would also consult with the New York Mental Health Counselors Association and the ACA chapter of New York, as that is, I am in New York, and so I think that those would be sufficient. So for some potential courses of action, I thought about what we could do to address and solve the problem. At first, I thought the receptionist could acknowledge the wrongdoing to the client and explain the steps that will be taken to prevent similar breaches of confidentiality. I thought that I could provide more training to staff, especially when it comes to confidentiality protocols, which was from Parker et al. 2022. And then I could revisit the policies and procedures that the practice has in place and maybe implement stricter guidelines when it comes to communicating with third parties and protecting client confidentiality, which is also seen in Remley and Heerly, 2016. I would consult with colleagues and my supervisor regarding the situation, as it may also affect them. And then another option would be to fire the receptionist. So after looking at the potential consequences of each action, if I have the receptionist apologize, it would show accountability from her, but possibly lacking accountability from the practice. And I think that this is a practice problem. So that maybe it should be the supervisor's job to approach the client. If I provide more training to support staff, it will teach confidentiality protocols more thoroughly and prevent similar breaches of confidentiality. I think as the counselor, we have to remember that our support staff did not go through the training that we did, and so it's important that we train them. If I revisit policies and procedures, I can make guidelines on confidentiality more strict. If I consult colleagues and supervisor, we can work as a team to ensure that confidentiality is on point in the practice. And if I fire the receptionist, I have to hire another one and teach them all over again. So I don't feel like that one necessarily will solve the problem. I would rather try to further train my receptionist and give her another chance. So the actions chosen was I would talk to my colleagues and supervisor, and then the supervisor would then talk to the client and take accountability for the practice as a whole, and the practice would then go over policies and procedures and implement a stricter guideline if need be, and would hold trainings for all the support staff regarding confidentiality laws, protocols, and ethics in the workplace so that this problem doesn't happen again. So the course of action that I chose after evaluating it, I thought that the supervisor and counselor will address the client. I think that it's also important that the counselor that sees the client should talk to the client as well. And then we will go over the policies and procedures, implement the stricter guidelines when it comes to confidentiality, train the support staff more efficiently, and ensure that this does not happen again. And when I thought about it with the test of justice, publicity, and universality, I thought that this passed the test. I felt that this is fair in the sense that it will prevent things like this from happening again to other clients. I felt that it was an honest mistake, and that we are doing everything we can as a practice through training and guidelines to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And then I felt that this course of action would be acceptable universally because it is fair. And I used Forrester, Miller, and Davis for this, 2016. So to implement this course of action, I would consult with my colleagues and my supervisor, and also an ethics committee if need be, about the problem. We would go over the policies and procedures that we already have in place and begin to implement stricter guidelines when it comes to speaking to third parties without prior client consent. Every support staff that we hired would definitely go through this new training and would be taught about these third party conversations. We would then schedule training for the support staff on the confidentiality and ethics. And in the meantime, the supervisor and counselor would also speak to the client regarding the issue at hand and explain what we are doing to correct the problem. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and the next slide will be the references that we used for, or that I used for this presentation. Thank you.